2025 had to be one of the biggest gaming letdowns in a while. First off, the state of the industry itself rarely looked this bad. Despite massive profit margins, CEOs don't hesitate to cancel games and shut down studios left and right. On top of that, publishers still have the nerve to pass inflation on to players, with unprecedented price hikes from all the platform holders. Putting that aside, on a personal level, it's been a while since I've played so many disappointing games, and that's what this video is about. But don't mistake me for a hater. 2024 was fantastic for people with my old school taste, and you can check out my top single player games of that year in another video. Yet in 2025, too many of gaming's worst trends made their way into big releases, which was disappointing because many of these titles are otherwise very good. I'll be discussing the 5 worst offenders, but feel free to disagree. Or maybe share your own gaming disappointments of late down below. You might have heard the saying, something can be a good game, but still a bad remake. And Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4 is a prime example for that. Because on the surface, Tony Hawk 3+4 is undeniably a good title. Just like 1+2, it features the addictive arcade-style gameplay loop of the series, and the concept of chaining tricks remains one of the clearest examples of a visible, satisfying learning curve within a video game. Anybody can pick up and play Tony Hawk and pull off a few stunts for a couple of minutes, but mastering its controls and style of combo making requires a bit of patience. There are few titles where learning and improvement is this noticeable, simply by looking at your own tricks and high scores getting more and more consistent. Still, there was a bigger problem people noticed after the game's announcement. Tony Hawk 4 was the first one to take the high score formula into a traversable map with a mission structure. It laid the groundwork for the series' next evolution, Tony Hawk's Underground, which would become a full-blown sandbox game with a story. The remaster 4 cuts the free roaming altogether and only provides the arcade challenge of the prior titles. But even if you don't have any attachment to the missing free roam mode, Tony Hawk 3+4 is an anachronistic effort that misses the point of the originals, not just 4 but also part 3. One core appeal of the original sequels was their innovation, pushing the concept forward to its perfection. One key aspect was the introduction of new ways to chain your moves into seamless combos. The problem is, the remakes of Tony Hawk 1 and 2 already had all these features. Not to mention that despite being one generation apart, it looks extremely similar to the first batch of remasters. It's always a little pompous telling developers and publishers what they should have done, but let's be real, the proper approach here seems kinda obvious. The original remasters should have included part 3, or if that would have been too ambitious, released it as an expansion shortly after. When they brought over 1+2 to PS5 and Xbox Series and Switch, that would have been a nice opportunity for that inclusion too. And by the time 3+4 came out, we should have gotten a double pack of the first campaign-focused Tony Hawk games instead, so 4 and Underground. Maybe with Tony Hawk 4 getting all the mechanics from Underground 2. Or a new game altogether, how about that? Silent Hill F is one of those titles that are disappointing because they actually have tons of potential, which they then fumble. To be frank, if this was just another bad Silent Hill game, it would have been no big deal. But it actually starts out very strong and could have been up there with the better and more unique titles in the franchise. Exploring its new setting in rural Japan is sometimes a little linear, but still feels rewarding and intriguing thanks to a world rich in detail, not just graphically, but in its entire build-up and narrative design. Exploring these areas and solving its often surreal puzzles feels intuitive and just challenging enough, whereas the additional dream world, where the main character Hinako is being observed by a weird guardian, gives it a wholly new twist. But then there's the combat, which actually isn't even bad in theory. Each weapon has a limited lifespan, and Hinako has a stamina bar. There are evasion bonuses, and every enemy can be stunned if they show an opening in their defense. However, these weak points are only visible for sometimes less than a second. At the same time, there's a focus mode which makes counterattacks easier and adds a charging attack. But this in turn requires mental health. This means that in all fights you have to decide whether to sacrifice a little sanity or risk a few more hits, whether to repair your weapon or try your luck with an escape maneuver. It's tough and the enemies take a lot to finish and will hit you hard, making each duel intense, and again it will force you to think about your resources. However, at some point the game clearly ran out of ideas or out of budget or both, turning it into a test of tedium. Here's a hot take: no one who gave this game a high score on Metacritic actually played it with the battle difficulty turned on. I just cannot believe that. The battle system isn't perfect to begin with. The camera is janky within tight corridors and the actual attack options are sparse. Yet the final hours turned Silent Hill F into a full-blown hack and slash with endless enemy waves and battle arenas, despite only featuring a handful of enemy types which appear over and over. Some of the normal enemies already take a dozen or more hits, which is then multiplied in these battle arenas. Multiple times in a row you need to fight the giant blob gatekeeper, which will eat an entire weapon's durability because it takes so long. Whereas the Silent Hill 2 remake felt a little too bloated at around 15 hours, Silent Hill F at 10 hours almost feels longer because the finale is so tedious and repetitive. The enemy patterns also never change. That might be the reason why they kept hiding zombies on the ceiling or in other spots that are hard to see, which results in players taking many unpredictable and annoying hits. It's a shame because even during that time the rest of the game was still engaging enough that I wanted to know where it was going until the end. We all know why there isn't more effort put into Pokémon. The games will sell no matter how cheaply they're made, and to be fair, I made peace with the fact that the series wasn't for me, despite growing up during the first big craze of Red and Blue. The target audience is kids, and Game Freak keeps copying the same success formula over and over to a T. But then came Pokémon Legends, which in theory did the right things to bring back old school fans. Similar to other monster fighting series like Shin Megami Tensei, the appeal of these spin-offs wasn't a new batch of creatures, but new game concepts built around the existing roster, which should be the way to go. The first Legends game, Arceus, finally found an intuitive way to capture these pocket monsters in real time and summon them on the map to fight and to do chores. And then Legends CA, in theory, once again moved in the right direction. It delivered a new concept instead of focusing just on new creatures, this time adding real-time combat on top of summoning and catching Pokémon on the map, which in the dedicated hunting zones can actually create some relatively challenging fights, because multiple enemies can gang up on you in real time. At the same time, if you have the right tactics, you can still overcome and catch even some of the high-level creatures to gain advantage in other areas of the game. It also didn't just rehash the sandbox Pokemon hunting of Arceus, but now focused on the trainer battles. And this idea of really prepping in the city during daytime for a big tournament at night to rise from rank C to rank A is pretty unique for JRPGs. Which is why I won't complain that the map is much smaller than in the prior game. It's a different idea, and the cityscape with its changing environments and day and night routine, as well as lots of vertical exploring on the rooftops, could potentially feel very intimate, but it's the production values. The presentation just kills any atmosphere the city could have had. Weirdly enough, there are a couple of indoor areas that look one generation above the outside sections, but it's hard to ignore the amateurish texture work in the main city. It's an often false claim about other games, but Legends CA really looks like a PS3 or PS2 game, and not like the ones with good art direction either. It's ironic, in the same year, developer Game Freak announced Reincarnation of the Beast, a clone of Sekiro and Nier Automata for stronger platforms. So they are capable of advanced visuals, they just choose not to make them for Pokémon. But actually, in CA it isn't only the graphics. While the main concept is a breath of fresh air on paper, they rushed the execution. It's one of the weirdest RPG moments in recent memory. The game jumps more than half of its tournament rankings, and after that it takes away all your freedom to tackle the tournaments the way you want. So it can instead follow a linear questline full of unbearably boring cutscenes. Some people argued that a full 26 ranks would have been boring to fight through, but then what was the point to begin with? As an alternative, they could have lowered the fee for rank battles and make multiple boss fights possible within a single night. Either way, another Pokémon opportunity wasted. Monster Hunter Wilds first looked like a huge success with record-breaking player numbers on launch day after a big pre-launch hype cycle. About half a year later, Capcom recorded a total plunge in sales and the Steam version sits on mostly negative reviews. There are multiple reasons for that. The PC version suffered from performance issues and the post-launch roadmap wasn't as substantial as in more traditional live service games. I won't lie, personally, those things don't affect me much. What did irritate me is that Capcom has severely nerfed the core gameplay loop. It seemed like Capcom was going to take their man vs nature concept to the next level with an open world that had more dynamic monsters and weather effects. But ironically, they removed so much friction, it's actually become more linear than ever and barely offered any player agency within these maps. And no, it isn't because I'm already familiar with the concept from older games. Now, Monster Hunter isn't your typical hack and slash game. Instead of button mashing, the combat relies on thoughtful maneuvers and deliberate attacks with your sometimes slow weapons. All the new monsters are great additions to the series. Capcom has truly mastered this particular kind of creature design. On one hand, the sophisticated animation work creates intense attack patterns. On the other, it makes these creatures feel alive and like an organic part of this primeval fantasyland, no matter how ridiculous. But combat was always only one part of Monster Hunter. Another crucial aspect of this hunting concept was the preparation. You had to investigate the areas and find material to craft a number of tools and traps from the natural resources around you to stand a chance against these beasts. You had to search for materials, build a home base, and learn the intricacies of these maps. Worlds still balanced it out by only activating your full GPS system after finding multiple tracks of your desired monster in the area. It still felt like hunting. But Monster Hunter Wilds streamlines the non-combat elements so much that they're almost irrelevant. In my opinion, Wilds isn't necessarily too easy, but too simple. The fights themselves are about as long as in prior games and easily can take up to 10 or 20 minutes if you play alone. So the actual monsters don't really feel weaker per se. However, Wilds also gives you a mount which will take you to each target monster like a taxi. The game literally showers you in healing items, and even late in the game, it will automatically provide you with all the necessary buffs like heat protection. There's no incentive for you to interact with the environment anymore or plan things out. You could also wrap yourself in healing items and buffs in prior games, but you had to prepare them yourself. Here it's possible to reach the post game without ever making a single potion yourself. You might not even need to upgrade your gear more than twice in the story mode. And because the game design is now so simple, this very crude walking and talking approach of storytelling now replaces the preparation and investigation gameplay of before. It's ironic, it introduced the series to open world design, yet it's by far the most linear game in the franchise. Monster Hunter Wilds is still a great arena-based action game, but it stripped away the actual hunting. Expectations couldn't have been higher for Metroid Prime 4. It was one of the first games announced for the original Switch in 2017, before going into 8 years of development under different studios. And shortly before its release, a remake of Metroid Prime 1 literally became one of the highest rated games of the generation. So the new game had even more to live up to. The original is still a masterclass in immersive game design. It was up to the players to use their own wit to conquer a big hostile alien labyrinth with a moody atmosphere of isolation. So there was understandable disbelief and backlash when previews of Prime 4 showed quippy side characters that told you what to do.
To reach the next tower, you'll need to open the big door in this room.
Ironically, with my expectations lowered, the game did surprise me early on, before slowly squashing all my goodwill again. And one core element is responsible for that, but it wasn't the new characters. Make no mistake, social media style meta dialogue has no place in an atmospheric series like Metroid, but there was enough quality early on to ignore that. Now, Metroid Prime 4 might be the most linear game of the franchise. There are 5 dungeons and most of them are structured like straightforward hallways. The branching paths are very simple and even the optional items are poorly hidden. However, even that in itself isn't a major flaw. One key element of Prime was the interaction with your surroundings. While linear, many rooms in Prime 4 still have to be investigated for clues, or they require Samus's spacesuit abilities to overcome dangerous hurdles. And I was positively surprised that the NPCs don't spoil the puzzle solutions. As a linear action adventure like Tomb Raider or something, this can still work. Sadly, they tried to bring back the series' signature backtracking, but in the worst way possible. And this is the crux of Prime 4. Backtracking and so-called exploring have been pushed into a gigantic field of nothingness. Look, I can take a barren hub world. No More Heroes is one of my most replayed games, and if you know that game, you know what that means. The open-air map in Prime 4 might rank among the worst ever made for a big production. Visually, it looks at least one generation behind all the other areas, and there's no music to save the atmosphere either. It also doesn't have any activity apart from the occasional alien bird to shoot, and besides all that, it simply isn't fun to control the bike. Yet that's where you spend most of your time in the second half of the game. Instead of finding your electro beam, for example, you have to traverse from one end of the map to the other multiple times, go through already cleared dungeons, and then back to your base so the Marine Mackenzie can activate it. Backtracking is a core part of the Metroidvania genre, but here it never feels natural. It's pure artificial bloat. And if it wasn't tedious enough, you'll have to destroy hundreds of these green rocks in the fields, awkwardly circling around them with your janky bike. Otherwise, you can't reach the final boss. The hub world is also where the NPCs are the most intrusive. In the dungeons they are silent, but here they will tell you where to go all the time, over and over, further making this entire open map redundant.
You might want to go back and check if there's anything you missed. Have you checked out the volcano?
Also, this is me speculating, but it feels like they ran out of puzzle ideas after a while. The thing is, Prime wasn't a shooter, but more of an adventure like Zelda, where combat was secondary and boss fights were almost like big puzzles. The bosses remain decent in Prime 4, but later on, there's a growing number of unimaginative shootouts, which just aren't engaging with those adventure controls. Maybe these sections wouldn't have been needed if they'd spent those resources on more puzzle-heavy areas instead of that terrible hub world. And that's a wrap on 2025 from me. Again, feel free to post your own opinions and disagree, or if you found any of this babbling interesting, maybe share the video and leave a comment too. And if you think it was all bad, then also share it and make others chime in to lambast it all. Either way, thanks for watching.